The ship floated in the cold silence of space, its metal skin shining like a blade in the dark. Inside the ship, a man named Kale sat at the command chair, his eyes sharp but tired. He was once a soldier, trained to follow orders without question. Now he worked as a trader, moving from planet to planet, obeying the demands of those who paid him. On that day, he received a message, the kind of message that carried no warmth, no choice, only command. The voice came through the speakers, cold and flat. You are ordered to capture the alien female and her young ones. Deliver them to the market. Payment will be waiting. The voice ended, leaving only static. Kale leaned back, his jaw tight. He had heard many orders before. He had fought battles, carried weapons, and guarded prisoners. But this was different. This was not about soldiers or criminals. This was about a mother and children. He opened the file that came with the order. The screen showed images, grainy but clear enough. A tall alien female with silver skin and large dark eyes. Behind her stood two small children, clinging to her legs, their faces filled with fear. Kale stared at the image, his chest heavy. The order said they were valuable, rare. A high price was promised if they were delivered alive, but it also said nothing of mercy, nothing of protection. They were to be treated as property. Kale closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the old training halls where commanders shouted, "Obey without question, survive without thought." Those words had kept him alive in war, yet now they felt like chains around his heart. He walked through the narrow halls of his ship, each step echoing like a drumbeat. The ship was quiet. The only company he had was the hum of the engines and the flicker of the lights. Outside, the stars stretched endless. Inside his mind stretched doubt. Why a mother? Why children? He thought, what danger could they bring? What crime had they done? But orders were orders. He knew the penalty of disobedience. Disobedience meant death or exile. Kale sat in the pilot's seat, his hands hovering over the controls. His mission coordinates blinked on the screen. They pointed to a small moon on the edge of the system. That was where the alien family hid. That was where his choice waited. He thought about the payment, the credits promised, enough to keep him safe for years, enough to buy a bigger ship, enough to escape the hunger of the galaxy. It was tempting, it was strong, yet the image of the children returned, their wide eyes, their small hands gripping their mother. He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. Do not think, only act, he whispered the old words. But his voice cracked. As the ship moved closer to the moon, the silence grew heavier. He checked his scanners. He could see faint life signs, weak, hiding. They were there, waiting, unaware of the shadow moving toward them. Kale's heart beat harder, every beat louder than the ship's engines. He remembered nights when he was young, alone in war camps, cold and forgotten. He remembered wishing someone would choose him, protect him, but no one ever came. The memory burned, and he felt the weight of the order press harder. He stood up, his hand touched the blaster at his side. The weapon felt heavy, heavier than it ever had. He looked at it, then looked again at the blinking coordinates. Each blink was like a heartbeat counting down. Outside, the moon came into view. Its surface dark with shadows, caves and rocks covered its skin. The perfect place to hide, the perfect place for a mother to protect her young. Kale whispered to himself, "They want me to sell them." The words tasted bitter. He thought of markets, cages, chains, people shouting prices, children crying, mothers begging. He clenched his fist. The order was clear. The punishment for refusal was clear. Yet the choice inside him was not. The engine slowed as the ship entered orbit. He could land any moment. He could finish the task quickly, take the credits, forget the faces, forget the children, forget everything. But something inside him whispered louder than the order, a voice he had buried long ago, a voice that said, "Do not be the monster they want you to be. Be something else. Be more." Kale gripped the controls. His ship hovered above the moon. The darkness below waited. The alien family waited. His fate waited. The order still echoed in his ears, the cold voice repeating, "Capture them. Deliver them. Sell them." But Kale's heart was no longer silent. It beat with a question, a dangerous question. Would he follow the Dark Order, or would he break it? The engines roared. The ship began to descend. And Kale knew this was the beginning of something greater than credits, greater than commands. This was the moment where a man had to decide what it truly meant to be human. Kale's ship landed on the silent moon. The landing gear touched the rocky surface with a dull echo. Dust rose and drifted into the air. The place looked empty, but Kale knew life was hidden here. His scanners had not lied. He stepped down from the ramp. The air was thin but still breathable. The sky above was covered with thick clouds that hid the stars. Shadows stretched across the rocks. Deep caves yawned like open mouths. The silence felt alive, as if the moon itself watched him. Kyle moved slowly, his hand resting on the blaster at his side, but his eyes searched the darkness. He was not only a soldier now, he was a hunter, and yet something inside him felt wrong. Each step forward felt heavy, as if he was walking towards something that would change him forever. Then he saw it, a small flicker of movement near the rocks, something delicate, something not shaped like a warrior. Kale froze, his breath caught, and from the shadows, a figure appeared. It was the alien mother, tall and graceful even in fear. Her silver skin caught the faint light of the clouds. Her dark eyes locked on him, sharp but calm. Behind her, two small shapes clung to her. The children, their bodies trembling but their eyes wide with curiosity. Kale did not raise his weapon. Instead, he lowered it slowly. His voice came soft but steady. "I will not hurt you." The words felt strange in his mouth, words he had not spoken for years, words of comfort. The mother tilted her head, her arms spread to shield her young. She did not answer, but her eyes seemed to question him, to search his soul. The children peeked from behind her legs. One of them let out a small sound, half fear, half wonder. Kale felt the weight of the order pressing in his mind. He remembered the voice, cold and clear. Capture them, deliver them. But now, standing in front of them, the order felt like poison. These were not beasts. These were not property. They were a family. He took one careful step closer, his boots crunching on the stone. The children pressed tighter against their mother, but she did not retreat. She stood her ground, her body trembling only slightly. Kale removed his helmet so they could see his face, a human face lined with years of war, but open and unmasked. "My name is Kyle," he said. "I was told to take you, but—" He stopped, unable to finish. The words hung heavy in the cold air. The mother's gaze softened just a little. Her lips moved and a sound like a whisper of wind came out. Her language was strange, melodic, yet broken with fear. Kyle could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was asking, begging, pleading. The children moved again. The smaller one slipped and almost fell. Kale reached forward without thinking, his hand catching the child before it hit the stone. The child looked up at him, eyes wide and glowing, not with fear, but with something else, something like trust. Kale's heart shook. In that small gaze he saw innocence, hope, and the question of whether he was friend or foe. The mother pulled the child back quickly, her arms holding both children close, but she no longer looked at Kyle with only fear. There was confusion in her eyes now, confusion and a spark of hope. The silence stretched. Only the wind whispered through the rocks. Kyle stood still, his hand lowered, his weapon forgotten. He realized this was not a battlefield. It was a meeting of two worlds. He remembered his own past, the lonely nights as a boy in war camps, no one to hold him, no one to call him family. He looked at the children and felt the echo of his younger self. He felt something he had buried long ago. At that moment, he made a choice, a silent choice. He would not capture them. He would not sell them. He would protect them. But he also knew danger was close. His commanders were watching. They expected his report soon. If he delayed too long, they would suspect. They would send hunters. Kale took a slow breath. He whispered gently, "You must come with me. They will come for you. They will not stop." He touched his chest, then pointed to his ship, then back to the family, trying to show his intent. The mother looked at her children, then at him. Her eyes narrowed, but she did not move away. The older child whispered something in her ear. Her body softened. Kale felt hope rise, a fragile hope. Perhaps she would trust him. Perhaps she would let him protect them. But before anything more could be said, a sharp sound echoed across the moon, a sound of engines cutting through the clouds. Kyle's head snapped up, his blood froze. Hunters. They had come sooner than he expected, black ships breaking the silence of the sky, scanning lights cutting across the surface. The order was no longer just a command in his head. It was here, hunting, ready to tea. "Are the family from his hands?" Kale turned back to the mother, his voice sharp but urgent. "Now we must go. Trust me or it is the end." His heart pounded, his fate and theirs bound together in that single moment. The mother hesitated for a breath. Then she nodded, a tiny nod, but enough. She gathered her children close. Kale extended his hand, and for the first time, she placed hers in his. The first encounter had begun. Not with chains, not with cruelty, but with fragile trust in the shadow of danger. And so Kale's true war started, not against armies, not against planets, but against the Dark Order itself. The ramp of Kale's ship closed with a loud hiss. Inside the hold, the alien mother held her children close. Their silver skin shimmered faintly in the dim lights. Kyle walked to the cockpit, his mind heavy like a storm. The engines roared, and the ship lifted away from the moon. Outside the window, the hunters searched below, black ships circling like predators. Kyle kept his ship low and quiet, slipping into the shadows of the rocks. His fingers moved across the controls with skill, but his thoughts were not calm. They were burning. He had broken the order. He had chosen not to capture the family. He had chosen to protect them. Yet even as he flew, he knew the danger was not gone. His commanders would realize soon. They would know he had betrayed the command. Kale's heart beat fast. Each beat was louder than the engines. He had spent his whole life obeying, never asking, never refusing. Obedience had kept him alive. Obedience had given him food, rank, and a ship. Now he had stepped outside that path. Now he stood against everything he had been trained to be. He glanced back through the cockpit door. The mother watched him silently, her eyes dark but filled with questions. The children clung to her arms, one of them staring at Kyle with wide, glowing eyes. Kyle turned away quickly. The weight of their trust pressed hard on his chest. He remembered the file, the words that described them as cargo, the cold description that had erased their names, their voices, their worth. He clenched his fists. He could not think of them as cargo anymore. He had seen their fear. He had touched their trembling hands. They were not things. They were family. But what now, he asked himself? What future could he give them? If he kept them, he would be hunted. If he delivered them, he would become the monster he already hated. The conflict tore at him like claws. His mind drifted back to the war camps of his youth. Nights of cold metal floors, nights of hunger, nights of silence. He had been a child once too, forgotten, unseen. No one had protected him. He had learned to fight, to obey, to survive, but inside he had always wanted one thing, someone to choose him, someone to call him family. Now he saw that same loneliness in the alien children's eyes, and he felt the old wound open again. This was why he could not obey the order. This was why he had risked everything, but the fear of what came next gnawed at him. The communication panel blinked, a red light flashing, an incoming signal. Kale hesitated, then pressed it. The cold voice of his commander filled the cabin. "Report, Kale. Have you secured the targets?" Kale froze, his mouth dry. He could lie, he could stall, but the words would betray him. The mother's gaze burned on his back. The children listened too, waiting. He forced his voice to sound steady. "Searching still. The moon is empty." There was silence on the other side. Then the voice replied, "Do not fail, Kale. Do not think you can hide from the order." The signal cut, leaving the cabin quiet again. Kale wiped sweat from his brow. His hands shook slightly. He had bought himself a little time, but not much. They would know. They always knew. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes closing, his mind trapped between two roads. One road of survival through obedience, the other road of sacrifice through defiance. Both roads dangerous, both roads heavy. A sound came from behind, soft footsteps. Kyle turned. The older child had stepped closer, tiny hands gripping the edge of the seat. The child tilted its head, eyes glowing faintly, and spoke a single word in its language. Kyle could not understand, but he felt the meaning. Protector. The word cut through him like light in darkness. He had never been called that before, never seen as more than a weapon, but now a child, alien yet familiar, looked at him as if he were a shield. Kale's throat tightened. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing the child's arm, warm and trembling. The mother rose quickly, protective, but then she stopped. She saw the look on Kale's face, a look not of harm but of silent promise. Kale whispered, "I will protect you." The words almost broke him, but once spoken, they felt like truth. They felt like chains snapping free. The engines hummed as the ship moved deeper into space. Kale adjusted the course, not toward the market, not toward the commanders, but away, into the wild edges of the system where the Order's eyes were weak. The conflict inside him did not vanish, it grew heavier. But within that weight was a strange new fire, the fire of choice, the fire of being human. He knew the Order would not forgive him. He knew hunters would come. He knew betrayal had marked him. But when he looked back at the children resting against their mother, he also knew he had chosen right. For the first time in years, Kale was not a soldier obeying commands. He was a man fighting for something more. And in that moment, Kale understood. The real war was no longer outside in the stars. The real war was inside his own heart. The conflict within had begun, and there was no turning back. Kale's ship drifted into the edge of the system, far from trade routes, far from patrols. The stars outside burned faint but steady. Inside the cockpit, Kale sat tense, his hands never leaving the controls. The alien mother and her children stayed in the back, quiet but alert. The silence inside the ship was heavy. Kale knew the order would not stay silent for long. His lie would not last. They would trace his ship. They would send hunters. He had seen it before. No one escaped the order once marked as a traitor. He turned on the long-range scanners. The screen flickered. Empty space at first, then faint signals. Too faint to be traitors, too sharp to be lost ships. Kale's stomach tightened. They were coming. He stood and walked into the hold. The mother looked up at him, her eyes dark but steady. The children sat close to her, their small faces filled with both fear and trust. Kale took a slow breath. "We are being followed," he said softly. "They will not stop until they have you." The mother tilted her head. She did not understand every word, but she understood enough. Her arms pulled her children tighter, her gaze hard as steel. Kale saw the fire in her, the fire of a protector, a fire he had almost forgotten in himself. The ship shook suddenly, a tremor through the hull. Kale rushed back to the cockpit. The radar lit up, 3 hunter ships sliding into pursuit. Black wings sharp against the stars, their engines burning cold and fast. Kale cursed under his breath. He pushed the controls. The ship leapt forward, the engines screamed. The hunters followed close, their beams sweeping across the void. Kale twisted the ship through an asteroid field, rocks spinning and breaking around them, sparks flashing against the hull. Inside the hold, the children cried. The mother wrapped her arms around them. Kale gritted his teeth, his hands steady. This was not a simple escape. This was war. One hunter closed in, its cannons glowing. Kale rolled his ship sharply. The blast missed by inches, lighting up the rocks with fire. His ship groaned but held. Kale swung low, scraping across the surface of a giant asteroid. The hunters followed, relentless. He remembered old drills, old battles, the lessons of survival. His body moved by instinct, but his heart beat with something new. He was not fighting for rank, not for orders. He was fighting for them, for the mother, for the children, for family. Another blast shook the ship. Alarms screamed. Kale slammed the controls, firing counterflares. The hunter's lock broke, its shots scattering into the dark. Kale exhaled sharply, sweat dripping down his temple. He knew he could not fight them forever. His ship was fast but not strong. The hunters were built for this. He needed a plan. He needed to hide. He scanned the map. His eyes found a gas giant nearby, its storms thick, its rings wide, dangerous, but perfect for cover. He turned the ship sharply. The hunters adjusted, chasing like wolves after prey. The gas giant loomed ahead, a swirling monster of storms and lightning. Kyle pushed the engines harder. The ship rattled as if it would break apart. The children screamed, but the mother held them tight, her eyes never leaving Kale's back. The ship plunged into the rings, ice and rocks spinning low. Ike blades. Kale weaved through them. The hunters fired, but their shots scattered, smashing into drifting stones, explosions echoing like thunder. Kale rolled hard, diving into the thick clouds of the giant storm. The ship vanished into darkness. Winds roared. Lightning flashed around them. The hunters followed, their beams cutting through the clouds. Kale pulled the ship lower, deeper, trusting the storm to hide them. The ship shook violently. Alarms screamed again. Kale held the controls tight, his teeth clenched. The mother whispered softly to calm her children. Kale heard the sound behind him, and something inside him burned stronger. He remembered being alone in storms long ago. No one to hold him, no one to calm him. But now he was the one giving protection. He was the one standing between children and the dark. The hunters closed in again, their shadows breaking through the clouds. Kale's heart raced. He spotted a canyon below, carved into the giant's surface. Narrow but deep, he dove, the ship scraping the edge as sparks flew. The hunters tried to follow. One miscalculated and crashed against the rock, exploding into fire. The shockwave rocked Kale's ship. The children screamed again. Kale shouted over the alarms. "Hold on!" His hands steady as steel. The ship darted deeper into the canyon. The second hunter fired, the blast searing the walls. Kale twisted hard, the ship barely slipping through the narrow gap. The shot missed. One left, Kale thought. One more shadow to lose. He spotted a fissure in the canyon wall, narrow, almost invisible. He pushed the ship into it, scraping metal against stone, sparks lighting the dark. He cut the engines. Silence fell, the ship hidden in the crack. The last hunter roared past, unable to find them. Its scanners swept but missed. It flew on, chasing shadows deeper into the storm. Cale sat frozen, his breath heavy, his hands still gripping the controls. The ship groaned but held. Behind him, the mother whispered to her children, their cries softened into silence. Cale closed his eyes for a moment, the sound of their breaths alive behind him. The chase was not over, he knew. The order would send more. They would never stop. But for now, for this moment, he had kept them safe. Cale opened his eyes, his voice low but firm. I will not let them take you. The mother looked at him, her dark eyes filled with fire and something new, not only fear but trust. And in that storm, hidden from the hunters, Cale realized something deeper. He was no longer running only from the order, he was running toward a new life. A life where he was not a weapon, not a traitor, but a protector. The chase had begun, and it would not end until he faced the order itself. The storm around the gas giant raged on. Thunder rolled through the clouds, lightning lit the dark skies with sudden flashes. Inside the narrow fissure, Cale's ship floated in silence, hidden like a secret. The engines were off, the lights dimmed. Cale sat in the cockpit, his body tense but his mind slowly easing. The hunters were gone for now. The scanners showed nothing but storms and drifting rocks. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had just done. He had chosen to fight for them, and somehow, they had survived. He turned from the controls and walked back into the hold. The mother sat against the wall, her silver skin faintly glowing in the dim light. Her children leaned against her, their eyes heavy with fear but also with curiosity. Cale stopped, unsure how to speak, unsure how to begin. The older child looked up first, its eyes wide and bright, the same eyes that had called him protector without words. The child whispered something in its own tongue. Cale could not understand the language, but the tone was gentle, trusting, almost like a thank you. Cale lowered himself to one knee so he would not tower over them. His voice came soft. You are safe now. They will not find us here, not yet. The mother's eyes followed him carefully, guarded but less sharp than before. Cale reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, plain and dry, but food all the same. He broke it in half and offered it to the children. They hesitated, glancing at their mother. She gave the smallest nod. The children reached out and took it, nibbling slowly. Cale watched them eat, his chest heavy with memories. He remembered when he was a boy, hungry in the war camps, waiting for scraps from soldiers. No one ever offering kindness, no one ever protecting him. Now he sat here, offering food to children who were hunted just as he once was. The circle of fate felt sharp and strange. The mother spoke then, her voice soft and melodic. Cale could not understand the words, but the rhythm of her tone felt like gratitude. She placed her hand over her chest, then extended it slightly toward him. Cale did the same, hand over his chest, a gesture of silent respect. In that moment, no translation was needed. The younger child laughed suddenly, a small sound like silver bells. The sound surprised Cale. It cut through the heavy silence of the ship. He felt his lips curve into a smile, something he had not done in years. The child leaned closer to him, curious, its small hand brushing against his glove. Cale froze, not wanting to scare it. The child giggled again. The mother watched closely, but her face softened. Cale realized trust was being built, not with words but with small moments, small choices. He spoke again, his voice steady but quiet. I was ordered to sell you, to take you away, but I will not let them hurt you. The children did not understand his words, but they felt the tone. They leaned closer. The older one placed a hand on his arm. Cale felt warmth spread through him. The mother tilted her head, her dark eyes fixed on his. She did not speak, but her silence was louder than words. It was a silence of recognition, of seeing the truth inside. To him, Cale sat there longer, sharing food, sharing quiet, letting the storm outside rage while inside the ship a fragile peace grew. Later he returned to the cockpit, setting the ship on low power. He leaned back in the chair, his eyes closing for a moment, and for the first time in years, he did not feel alone. He felt the presence of something he had never truly known. Family. But the bond forming inside the ship did not erase the danger outside. Cale knew the order would not stop. He knew the hunters would return. Yet he also knew that if he was to survive, if they were to survive, Trust had to be real. Trust had to be strong. The next day, or what passed as a day in the endless storm, Kale tried again to speak. He pointed at himself. "Kale," he said clearly, then pointed at the mother. She looked at him, hesitated, then spoke a name in her tongue, soft but firm. He repeated it awkwardly, the sound rough in his mouth, but the children laughed gently, correcting him with their tiny voices. Kale tried again, and this time their laughter turned to smiles. He felt a warmth inside him stronger than any weapon. One by one he learned their names, broken and strange on his lips, but each name a gift, each name a bond. When the younger child grew tired, it leaned against him instead of its mother. Kale froze again, but the mother did not stop it. She only watched, her eyes softer now. Kale placed his arm lightly around the child, careful, gentle, as if holding the most fragile treasure in the galaxy. Something deep inside him shifted. The soldier who once followed orders was fading. The protector, the father he never thought he could be, was rising. Outside the storms roared. Hunters searched. The order waited. But inside the ship, Kale and the alien family were no longer strangers. They were no longer hunter and prey. They were beginning to be something else. Something stronger. A family bound not by blood, but by trust. And Kale knew in his heart that bond would be tested by fire soon. But it was a bond he would never break. The storm finally released them. Kale's ship drifted out from the clouds. The stars returned, sharp and endless. Silence filled the cockpit again. But Kale knew the silence was not safety. It was only the space between battles. The mother and her children slept in the hold, their breathing soft. Kale sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes heavy, but his mind restless. He thought of their faces, of the trust they had placed in him. He thought of the choice he had made, and the cost that was coming. The communication panel blinked suddenly, a red light flashing. Kale's heart froze. He knew before he even touched the switch who it was. The order. He pressed it. The cold voice of his commander cut through the cabin. "Kale, your silence speaks louder than words. You have failed to deliver the targets. You have betrayed us." Kale clenched his fists. "I will not hand them to you," he said, his voice steady but burning. "They are not things. They are not cargo. They are family." The voice did not change, calm and merciless. "You are nothing without us, Kale. We gave you a ship, a purpose, a life, and now you throw it away for creatures that are not even human. You are a traitor, and traitors are erased." Kale felt the weight of those words, but he did not break. He turned off the panel, his jaw tight. He knew what would come next. The children woke when the ship shook, a new signal flashing across the scanners. Hunters again, more this time. 5 ships sliding out of the dark, their weapons armed, their engines hot. Kale's stomach twisted. The mother came to the cockpit, her eyes sharp. She saw the hunters on the screen. She did not need translation. She knew what they meant. Kale looked at her and whispered, "They will not stop. Not until they destroy us or take you." She placed her hand on his shoulder, firm and strong. No words, only trust. Kale nodded, his hands moved. Across the controls, the ship turned sharply, engines roaring. The chase began again, but this time the hunters were faster, their formation tighter. Kale fired countermeasures, but the beams cut closer, striking the hull. Alarms screamed, the children cried, sparks rained through the ship. Kale shouted, "Hold on!" as he rolled the ship into a dive. One hunter moved ahead, cutting off his path. Kale cursed. He twisted hard, but the shot came too fast. Fire ripped across the side of his ship. Panels burned. The hull groaned. Kale's teeth clenched. He pulled away, his ship trailing smoke. The hunters closed in. The trap was working. Kale knew the commander had planned this. They had left him no way out. The mother grabbed his arm, her eyes fierce. She pointed toward the children. Kale understood. He had to fight, not just flee. He armed his weapons, missiles loaded, cannons charged. His ship was weaker, but he had skill, he had will. He fired. The first missile tore through one hunter, its black hull exploding into fire. The children gasped. The mother held them close. Kyle pushed harder, but the others circled him. Beams flashing, his ship shook. Sparks filled the cockpit. His vision blurred, yet he did not stop. He fired again. Another hunter burst into pieces, but his ship took another hit. The engines screamed. Warning lights flashed red. Kale gritted his teeth. "Not yet, not while they live," he whispered. His eyes burned with fire. Then the panel blinked again. The commander's voice filled the cabin, cold and sharp. "Enough, Kyle. Do you not see? You cannot win. Surrender them, and I may spare your life." Kyle spat the words back. My life is nothing without them. The voice laughed, a hollow sound. You think you are their protector, but you are only their doom. You cannot keep them safe. You cannot keep yourself safe. And when you fall, they will fall. Too, their blood will be on your hands. Kale's heart trembled. Doubt pierced him. His hands shook. The words echoed in his mind. Was he protecting them, or was he only dragging them into death? The mother touched his arm again, her gaze strong, her dark eyes unshaken. She whispered something in her tongue. Kale could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. It was not doubt. It was not fear. It was faith. The children looked at him too, their eyes wide, trusting, calling him protector. Kyle felt the doubt burn away. His voice roared back at the empty sky. Then let me fall with them, but I will never betray them. He pushed the engines, fire bursting from the broken hull. The ship shot forward, through the hunters, weaving and striking, his heart beating like thunder. The betrayal was complete. The order had turned on him. His old life was ashes, but in that fire something new was born. He was not their soldier anymore. He was not their tool. He was free but hunted. And as the hunters closed in again, Kale knew the battle had only begun. The ship drifted through broken space, its hull scarred, its engines weak. Smoke lingered in the air, but it was still flying. Kale sat in the pilot's chair, his hands steady on the controls. Behind him, the mother and her children rested, their bodies tired but alive. The hunters had been left behind in the storm of the gas giant, 2 destroyed, the rest scattered. But Kale knew the order would send more. They would never forgive him, never stop. Yet for the first time, he did not feel fear. He felt a strange peace, a fire that burned brighter than fear. The children had stopped crying. The younger one leaned against Kyle's arm when he returned to the hold, its tiny voice whispering soft sounds he did not understand, but he understood the feeling. It was not fear anymore. It was trust. The mother sat close, her eyes fixed on him, dark and deep. And she raised her hand to her chest, then to him, the same gesture she had made before, but now it felt stronger, as if a bond had been sealed. Kale nodded, his voice quiet but steady. I am with you, always. He remembered the words of the commander, the threat, the promise of death. But those words felt far away now. He thought instead of the laughter of the children, the warmth of their touch, the strength of the mother's gaze. These were the things that gave his life meaning. Not credits, not orders, not survival alone. Kale set a course for the edge of known space, the wild zones where no law ruled, where the order's reach grew weak. It was dangerous, filled with pirates, storms, and secrets, but it was freedom. It was a chance for them to live. As the ship crossed into the dark zones, Kale thought of his past, the years of obeying, the years of being used as a weapon. He thought of the boy he once was, cold and forgotten in war camps, no one to call him family, no one to protect him. And he realized something. He had become what he once needed. He had become family to those who had no one. The older child moved closer, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It spoke again, a word Kale could not understand, but the tone was soft, proud. Kyle repeated the sound awkwardly. The child laughed, the mother smiled. Kyle felt something break inside him. The hard shell he had carried for years cracked open, and warmth spilled through. He was not only a protector now, he was more. He was part of them, part of something larger than himself. The ship's alarms beeped faintly, a reminder of danger, but Kyle ignored them for a moment. He let himself breathe. He let himself feel the quiet bond growing inside the ship. He whispered to himself, family is not blood, family is choice. The words felt true, they felt alive. Outside the stars stretched endless, the void vast and cold, but inside the ship it no longer felt empty. The children's laughter echoed, the mother's soft voice hummed. Kyle's steady presence guided them forward, together. Hours passed, the scanners stayed quiet. No hunters, no signals, only the silence of the frontier. Kyle leaned back in his chair, his eyes heavy, but his heart lighter than it had ever been. He dreamed for a moment, not of war, not of orders, but of a home. A place where the children could grow without fear, where the mother could rest without looking over her shoulder, where he could wake and not feel chains around his soul. It was only a dream, but for the first time in his life, it felt possible. The younger child climbed onto his lap, curling against him like a small flame seeking warmth. Kale froze at first, then slowly wrapped his arm around it, careful, protective. The child sighed, safe. The mother watched, her gaze soft. Kale felt a tear slip down his face, a tear he had not shed in years. He whispered again, "You are my family now." His voice cracked, but the truth in it was unshaken. The scanners blinked once, faint signals on the edge of detection. KL straightened. The orders still hunted, their shadow never far. But KL did not fear them now. He knew what he was fighting for. He knew who he was fighting for. He was no longer the soldier who obeyed. He was no longer the traitor who sold for credits. He was KL, protector, father, family. The children's laughter filled the cabin, the mother's presence steady and strong. KL's hands tightened on the controls, his eyes set on the stars ahead. Whatever came, he would face it. Not alone, not broken, but as part of something new, something greater, a family born in fire, Carrie. By trust and bound by choice. And in that endless night of stars, KL smiled for the first time in years. Not the smile of a soldier, but the smile of a man who had finally found his place. The chase, the betrayal, the battles, all of it had led here, to this truth. He was theirs, and they were his. A new family had begun, and nothing in the galaxy could take that away.